Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Dr. Nathan Jauvtis, founder and chief scientist at Bolt Motorbikes. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited at what you guys are doing. It's very cool, and I love the whole concept behind it and just kind of why you decided to go for it. But maybe before we kind of cover exactly what Bolt Motorbikes is, let's get to know you a little bit better and kind of cover where you grew up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a East Coast transplant. I was born in the Boston area, a little town called Lexington, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And just like a lot of my high school friends, shipped out of town at age 18 to go off to school, to college.
So what did you take in college?
I studied mechanical and aerospace engineering for my undergraduate degree, and I had such a fun time doing it that I stayed at Cornell for another 4 years to pick up a PhD in mechanical engineering.
So what got you kind of passionate about engineering, and why did you decide to go into the field?
It's a kind of funny story. So I've always been really active with my hands. I love building things and creating things, and even before I actually knew what gear ratios were and torque curves and all this kind of stuff, I was designing gear reductions for my motorized skateboards and my motorized scooters that I was making as a 13-year-old.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but the thing that really, and I actually went off to college because I wanted to be a physics major. And what really drew me to physics was mechanics, the F equals ma, and the statics, like how to build a structure. So I was well along my way in physics, and you probably know Bill Nye, the science guy.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, he was a Cornell mechanical engineer, graduated in 1977. It was a great year.
Huh.
And he comes back every year to speak to the engineers.
Awesome.
And a friend of mine said, Hey Nate, I've got an extra ticket to see Bill Nye, the science guy. Do you want to come? And I said, of course I do. And so I sat front row and center, and the things that he had to say about engineering and mechanical engineering in particular, like I knew at that moment that mechanical engineering is what I wanted to do.
Oh, very cool. I think like a lot of kids that were kind of grew up in the 80s, early 90s, I'm sure he inspired tons of people, right?
Absolutely. Totally.
So, okay, so you graduate Cornell. What did you end up doing after you left university?
Well, after my grad studies, I sold my motorcycle for gas money so
Really?
I could drive across the country with my life's belongings and my girlfriend's life's belongings in her station wagon. We ended up in Southern California.
So what made you go to Southern California?
Well, I discovered Southern California, like the Newport Beach, the Huntington Beach area, when I was in college out for track and field spring training. And I was like, wow, I want to go to this place. The weather was beautiful. The people were fun, and the waves and the beaches were awesome. So I've always been sort of drawn to extreme and action sports like motorcycles, skateboards, windsurfing, BMX, all these kinds of fun things.
Sure.
Fun things for me anyways.
Sure.
And what I discovered was that to get into that industry, it's a lot more who you know than what you know. And I knew a lot, but I didn't know so many people. So I ended up with some silly aerospace engineering job and did that for a couple of years and realized that wasn't quite for me. I loved the engineering, but to be in a company of 40,000 people in 44 countries around the world, I found myself having to get 5 signatures, and it might take a week just to drill a hole in a box that would take me 5. That would take me 5 minutes, which included the cleanup. So, yeah. So I loved the engineering, but it was too much of a big shift for me to redirect. So then that's when I sort of discovered startups. I'm like, wow, this stuff is awesome. where I can work hard and I can make meaningful contributions and make changes and impact culture. It was eye opening, and that was up in San Francisco when I started about 10 years ago.
Okay, so did you move to San Francisco and then find a job, or did you move to San Francisco already having a new job?
Fun quick story there is that I said goodbye to North America, and I went for a trip to South America to explore other cultures and see the world a little bit.
Very cool.
And when I came back to North America, I had, at that point then, my life's belongings in my Volkswagen Beetle, and I had a friend named Doug who lived in San Francisco. So I said, hey, I'm going to go visit Doug, and I slept on his floor for a couple of, 3 weeks, found a house, found a job, found a surfboard, went on some dates, it was all with Craigslist, and then I found my first moped, and it was awesome. And
really?
It really just sort of, it was, mopeds were so great for getting around the city where a car is just a pain with parking and traffic. And I had my bicycle with me, but that was only good for a couple of blocks. And with the hilly city of San Francisco,
sure.
My moped was so great for getting around, but it was really an environmental nightmare. You mix your gas and your oil, and half of it goes out the tailpipe in a cloud of smoke. And as fun as they were to ride and fun to work on, it really wasn't a long-term solution. So
Sure.
this sort of gets into the birth of Bolt Motorbikes, and that's a friend of mine knew that I was involved with electric mobility and knew that I was into mopeds and motorcycles. And he said, hey, Nate, what do you think it would take to make an electric moped? And that was 6 years and 58 days ago.
Wow.
And that started it all.
So, okay, so you and a friend basically started the company, correct?
Yep.
And are you guys still partners now?
Not with that guy. We're still good friends.
Okay.
But it wasn't the right business relationship.
Sure.
And so we parted ways. I mean, on great terms. But we've since he's gone on to his ventures, and I built up my team, and we've built the company into what it is today.
So, okay, so tell me, let's cover kind of more of the early stages of this thing. So, how did you you have this idea. Where do you start? Because, like, I get you have a background in engineering and you understand this stuff, but, like, where do you even start when you're looking to, build something from nothing, and especially something that's complicated like a motorbike or a moped?
Well, that's a great question. Really, it starts just out of passion.
Okay.
And I had experience in electrifying mobility. I built electric powered wheelchairs, and then after that job, that was my first job in San Francisco, and I went to work with Zero Motorcycles.
Okay.
And these guys make electric motorcycles, and they're arguably the world leader in electric motorcycles these days. And when I was working there, we were ramping up to our first 50 bikes. So kind of a similar stage of where Bolt actually is today. And so the things I learned along the way, I was able to apply to Bolt Motorbikes, which back then wasn't the name Bolt Motorbikes. We were just making a really cool motorbike. And so I had this experience in electric vehicles, and it just sort of more, I guess it sort of just, it turned into, or Rex, let me step back.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. When I started making these bikes, it was really a project of passion. It was nights and weekends because I had a day job.
Sure.
And someone once told me, you either have a day job with all kind of money, but not enough time to work on your projects.
Yep.
Or you have no job, all kinds of time, but no money to work on your project.
Yep.
So I started working on my nights and weekends so that I could build these prototypes and refine the design. And then about 3 years ago, I quit my day job at the time and started going full time on Bolt.
Okay.
And their electric vehicles, at least at the time when I was starting these, were still pretty new.
Sure.
But there were forums out there, and if there were things that I didn't know how to do, there were other people who had some of these challenges that were hobbyists, and they were there to share their experience, and to that end, I also shared my experience, and it's this community of people really trying to make the urban transportation or electric mobility more available for the masses.
Sure. No, I think that's very cool. So it sounds like you were basically self-funded to start when you were kind of just working on the evenings and weekends, or did you raise some money at the very, very beginning?
Oh, it was entirely self-funded. At the time, it was building a prototype, and even then, the business model wasn't there. We wanted to make sure, first of all, that we could make a product that could actually be a viable solution to the
Right.
problems that we were trying to solve.
So did you basically manufacture and kind of fabricate kind of everything at the beginning just in your garage, or did you order parts or kind of a combination of both?
A little from column A, a little from column B.
Okay.
So I was actually, it's funny that the bike that we are building today has so many of the characteristics of the bikes that we were originally from prototyping from. So we started off with old moped frames, and we'd cut off the brackets that we didn't want, and we'd weld and braze on new brackets that we wanted, and we'd cut and machine new parts and weld new parts. And for the things that were not off the shelf, we would make ourselves.
Interesting.
So, literally, there was no sense reinventing the wheel. And
Sure.
so we would use off-the-shelf wheels, off-the-shelf forks. But the
Okay.
things that were custom to our application, we would build ourselves. So things like the batteries, the bodywork, the seats, the plastics, the dash, the user interface, all the wiring, the electronics. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer, and as a mechanical engineer, we have a little bit of experience in a lot of areas, including programming and electronics, but very much in the mechanics of how things go together and how to mechanically size components so that they can take the loading and the heat dissipation, all these kinds of things that are relevant in the vehicle.
Sure. No, that's really cool. So I'm curious though, you must have like a crazy big garage with a bunch of like machines and kind of gear, or do you kind of just use some of the stuff you have at home, or do you go like rent a
Yeah.
lab, or kind of how do you fabricate all these pieces? Because there's so many things going on, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of tools required to build the parts that go into our bikes, and over the years, I had developed I guess, my quiver of tools.
Okay.
And part of the idea is that when you're developing a prototype of anything, you can't do things like injection molded parts. Not
Okay.
if you're a small startup that hasn't raised substantial outside capital. For instance, to make a single injection molded piece that can fit into your palm of your hand might
Okay.
be a $10,000 or $15,000 tool
Oh
just to
wow.
make one part. And so that wasn't. It's certainly not a long-term solution if you're doing prototyping. Once you
Sure.
get into production and you raise money, or you've refined the design well enough, then it maybe makes sense to invest in this tooling. But we were in the early days just figuring out the proof of concept. How big does the battery need to be? How powerful does the motor need to be? What about the ride configuration, the user experience? These are all things that can be done that can look rough around the edges, but still have the functionality.
Totally.
So we designed our bikes. We started as a function-driven product, and
Okay.
then once we got the function right, then we worked on refining the design for aesthetics. So first it was function-driven, then we followed up with form.
Sure. So how long did it take you to get that kind of first functional prototype?
It was it was just a few months
Okay.
from the day that I met Dan for a cup of tea
Okay, awesome.
to when I was riding around on the first prototype. Just
So
a couple of months.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
I'm pretty good with my hands, and the internet is a great source for knowledge and prototyping parts.
sure.
And when you're prototyping, you don't have to be as conscious of shaving off the last penny, so you can pay a little bit more for an electric motor if you're just prototyping. Because also at the end of the day, if you find you don't want that and you're just prototyping, you can put it back up on eBay, for instance. So
Sure.
I don't know, of course, I had been working during the day, so saving up my money so that I could spend it on prototypes, um, and maybe taking my girlfriend out for a nice dinner or something like that.
Sure. That's awesome. So you were just like driving around the neighborhood in San Francisco?
Absolutely, yeah,
That's
just driving
awesome.
around and I would ride around. I would find out some areas where, hey, maybe if this were a little different, or if this were more powerful, or this could be lighter weight. I would make those modifications and then take it out for another test ride, and that this these iterations, these small changes, went into a bike that ended up having that bike is still in our shop today. It's a little bit of a museum piece, but that bike has 2,000 miles of city riding on it.
That's awesome. S-
Yeah.
So then how long did it kind of take you have this functional prototype, then you have like when you spent some time on kind of aesthetic and making the bike look how you wanted it to look. How long did that take after that?
Well, by this time, I it had been about maybe 3 years of prototyping and refining
Oh wow.
and working my day job and I guess we can say tinkering in the nights and weekends. And then when I quit my day job to go full time, it was probably another maybe 3 or 4 months till we had the next generation bike. And this went from basically a dumb bike that had the function that we were after to then adding an embedded system in our
Okay.
first pass at refining the aesthetic. And again, by this stage, we're not so concerned about manufacturability. We just need to make something, and then we can. Once that was made, then we can refine the manufacturing processes to make the parts scalable and scalable in production, scalable for cost, all these kinds of things.
Okay, so you made a new bike then. This is like prototype version 2?
Yep, actually, so the first bike became generation one, two, and three. And
Okay.
at a certain point, at that sort of 3 year time, we put a stake in the ground. We said, okay, this bike we've learned a lot from, but let's build a new bike from scratch.
Okay.
So again, we snatched up an old moped frame, cut off the brackets we didn't want, we welded and brazed on the ones we did want, and now we started making the parts that would have the look and feel of what the production bike would look like. So you
Right.
can think of that as our generation four.
Okay,
And
interesting.
with generation four, the cool thing there is it looked like a production bike, but it was a lot of filing and bending and pushing and grinding to get the look right. And then once we had that in place, this generation four bike that we call Bluebird, we name all of our bikes.
Okay.
Uh, Once we had Bluebird in place,
What's the
we
story
then
behind the name, just out of curiosity?
just so that so we don't have to say, oh, that bike.
I got you. But why
And
Bluebird? Was there a reason or?
well, because the fourth generation Bluebird had a blue accent to it. And yes,
Oh,
there's
okay.
some photos on our website and in some of our media. It was the only bike that we made with this blue accent because when we had Blackie, which was the first bike, which was basically all black.
Okay.
Um, we worked with a designer friend of ours, and that's where we went from function, function, function to function, function, form in generation four. And to get to generation four, we worked with our designer friend, and he took our CAD model and extended this and extruded that and pulled this and added some color here, and we found something that was basically what we wanted to work toward. We just had to figure out how to make it. And that's what led us to this generation four Bluebird.
Interesting. So when you quit your full-time job, did you save a bunch of money or did you raise some money or a little bit of
Yeah,
both?
I worked really hard for a number of years so that I could save money to build this business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even to date, we are self-funded entirely.
Really? Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, we had an Indiegogo campaign in this past October, which it was really more pre-sale. So we're selling bikes. It's not that we're raising money, because that money went to building bikes. But otherwise, we've been entirely self-funded.
Okay. No, that's very cool. So this version 4 Bluebird, is that basically the first production version that you basically went and said, okay, we're going to manufacture this exact bike?
Before we went and manufactured that exact bike, we took Bluebird and we refined our CAD model to match Bluebird.
Oh, okay.
And so from Bluebird, which was generation 4, we then built Raven, and that's
Okay.
the 5th generation bike. And we built Raven just by looking at the instructions. So it wasn't filing and grinding and pushing and bending and forming and pushing some more. It was, can we build a bike just by reading the instructions? And it worked. And that was
Interesting.
generation 5. And generation 5 looked so good that, for instance, GQ magazine called it the best stuff of the year in 2015, which
That's
is the number
awesome.
1 spot.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, man. It was really it was a real pat on the back to know that that something that we created out of nothing had this worldwide appeal, and that people were really kind of digging it, and people started buying that bike, or at least pre-ordering that bike.
Sure.
And that was the bike that was in our Indiegogo campaign, and Generation 5 was awesome, but it wasn't good enough for us. So we refined the manufacturing processes and adjusted some of the material selection that we used in the bike. And now we came up, and now we're building Generation 6, which is the bike that our customers are buying. That's the production bike.
Okay. So I'm curious then, where are you guys doing the manufacturing, and are you guys assembling yourself? Are you getting them built somewhere else, or?
We assemble our bikes entirely right here in Brisbane, California.
Okay, awesome.
We make most of the parts right here in Brisbane, California.
That's
now,
awesome.
Of course, it really is awesome, and part of the motivation to build all this and assemble in-house, we call it the fruit model.
Okay.
There's a fruit company in Cupertino, California, that makes computers and MP3 players and iPads, and part of their success is that they control production.
Sure.
They control the software, and they control the hardware.
Yeah.
And that was the motivation, the inspiration for what we're doing. And that because we can institutionalize this knowledge, we can build and we can grow and we can iterate faster than anybody out there.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting that you're basically applying a tech company model to building motorbikes, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the product is, right? It's the whole process and the belief and the basically, like you just mentioned, like the fact that you can control everything, right?
Yeah,
is awesome.
Absolutely.
And so I'm curious then, how big is your team then? You must have quite a big facility, and you must have a pretty decent sized team.
We've got a really nice facility here in Brisbane. It's got enough space for us to have a nice little showroom. It's got office space, of course, and manufacturing and storage and warehouse, right, all under one roof. So we can, and it's really cool when we have our potential customers come in and potential investors come in. They can walk in, they can see really where the magic happens. We can show them a nice experience, take them out for a demo ride. They can meet our team and really see where their bike is being built.
That's awesome.
And that's really cool. And I think that's something that a lot of companies don't have, because their bikes are being built in China or in Mexico or something like that, maybe in India. But people get to see where their bike is being built. And we like to say that bikes are being hand built by highly overqualified individuals.
That's awesome.
And what I mean by highly overqualified individuals is that we have top engineers building these bikes. And the reason we do this is part of this fruit model. Because if we can learn from each iteration, each bike build, we can learn and refine our process to make it better for manufacturing.
Sure. So how long roughly does it take to go from basically like parts to a fully working bike?
We can assemble a bike in an afternoon.
Wow, really?
But we don't just make one bike at a time.
Okay.
We're going to be building parts for a batch of bikes.
Okay.
And then we can take those parts and make sub-assemblies, and we'll make a batch of sub-assemblies.
Okay.
And then we just reach into our supply cabinet, our stock shelves, and then just pull those parts and assemblies and just put those onto a bike. And so we can actually assemble a bike in an afternoon. The time-consuming part is making the parts and making the assemblies. And because we do that in-house, we can learn what are the parts that make sense for us to keep in-house and what are the parts that make sense to outsource.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So you say a batch. How many do you guys do in a batch?
We're still in the early stages of production, so we're talking batches of 10 bikes. So, for instance, we have 10 bikes worth of parts on our shelves, and we're taking those 10 bikes worth of parts and we're making the 10 sub-assemblies. And we already have, some of the parts are pretty well set in stone, and so we have already 100 sets sitting on our shelves. And as I mentioned, as we're building, we're refining the process to streamline manufacturing. So some things we're making modifications to in the assembly story, in the assembly process.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then, how do people buy one?
Currently, we're offering our bike online. People can either just plain old order the bike online, or they can reserve the future by putting a deposit down on a bike so that the balance will be paid, say, a month before their bike is shipped. So that was, until recently, the only way for people to buy bikes. In January, we signed on the largest e-bike dealer on the West Coast.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thanks, man. They're called Seattle e-bikes.
Okay.
And you can imagine maybe where they're located.
Sure.
So Seattle e-bike is a great group of people, very knowledgeable, and what it allows us to do is leverage the infrastructure that's already in place. They picked up a fleet of our bikes.
Okay.
And so that they can now do demo rides, and they can provide the service, and people can come to them to ride and check out our bikes. So basically, it multiplies our reach.
Sure, that's awesome. And so if I how much does it cost, and then how long does it take for me to get one?
So $5,495 gets you the M1 motorbike, the bike that you see on our website.
Okay.
It comes with our 5-hour smart charger, which allows you to charge your batteries on the bike.
Okay.
And
wait, what do you mean what do you mean by that? Like you plug it in kind of thing, and you don't have to remove it?
It's kind of like a laptop brick. Where it's a little brick. One end you plug into the wall, the other end you plug into the bike, and you press go. And in 5 hours and about 21 cents worth of electricity, you've got a fully charged battery and you're ready to ride again.
So basically, it's a really good commuter bike. You basically just plug it in when you get to work.
Exactly. And then you go from work to go grab a burrito for lunch, and then after work you go to the gym, and you go to your friend's house and you go for a little joyride, and then you go home and then you charge it up at night, just like you do with your smartphone, and then you're ready to go in the morning.
I love that. That is awesome to me, and I'm assuming I can buy a second battery if I need to go longer than 5 hours.
Absolutely. So we do offer an accessory line, including batteries, including foot pegs, including your phone charge, including your off-bike charging accessories. So of course the batteries on our bike are quick release because these bikes are designed for city living, and not everybody in the city has a garage. So the
Sure.
idea is that you can lock your bike outside and take your batteries inside and charge them on our off-bike charging accessory.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. No,
Hmm.
that's really cool. So I'm kind of curious, is there other models planned for the future? Are you going to just keep with this one, or where do you see this kind of going?
Well, the cool thing about what we're doing, well, there are a lot of cool things, but one
Sure.
cool thing is that the technology that we're developing allows us to go up market and down market. If we want to make a higher performance electric motorbike, we can use a lot of the same technology and make an even higher performance bike. We can also go down market and offer more like a classic electric bicycle using the technology that we have. So we definitely have some ideas for different models in the future. Um, and just to give a little glimpse, so right now we make the M1, which looks like a sort of cafe racer motorcycle.
Yeah, it looks really
Um,
good. I really love
yeah,
the
thank you.
design.
Yeah, thanks. People really seem to like it, and that's again a really nice pat on the back because it's a creation that I've been working on and putting a lot of my time and effort and resources in for a pretty substantial portion of my life.
Sure.
And it's nice to know that people also like the stuff that I'm doing. So I guess it taps my ego a little bit.
Totally, and it
Um,
should.
yeah, but we've got some ideas for future models.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's we another company that has been a sort of inspiration for us is Tesla.
Sure.
And what Tesla did in the early days, if you remember their Roadster,
Yep.
they took their technology and they put it into an otherwise existing platform, the Lotus Elise, and they
Yep.
made this really cool electric vehicle that when they were out on the road, these 2,500 roadsters were establishing the Tesla brand, and they were validating their technology and giving Tesla great user feedback. And that's kind of like what we're doing with our M1. We're using the moped platform. We're putting our technology in there, and we're establishing our brand. We're getting great user feedback, and we're able to really just to get our bikes out there. All the meanwhile, we're developing our next generation for high volume production, kind of like Tesla's Model S.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So this might be like a weird question, but is there going to be like a M1 and then every year, like a new version kind of every year, or how does that kind of work? Because like, is it kind of the same as just like being a big kind of car manufacturer where they release a new year, right? Like I have this car
Yeah,
2016 or
right.
whatever.
Yeah, so I can see a 2016 M1. I can see a 2017 M1
Okay.
that will look very similar, but it has upgrades in either performance or the
Sure.
technology, something like that. But generally would look the same. I guess to put that into the Tesla analogy, they had their Roadster, which they
Sure.
were making for a few years, anyways. And then they made their Model S, and their Model S they've been now making for a few years, and then they introduced their Model X. So we can still be offering the same basic model, but just new years. And as the years go on, we can expand our product line. So maybe the MP model
Right.
or the MC model, something like these, which are different beasts, if you know what I mean.
No, totally. So I'm curious, what's the story behind the M?
Uh, M is it's a motorbike.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. No, that's cool. Like, it's just because you had like kind of different names for your prototype, so I was just kind of curious to know about the M, but that makes sense.
yeah. So each bike we give a name. So Genesis was the first bike of the Generation 6
Okay.
model. There's Genesis, there's Gemini, there's Knick, And we name all of our bikes, and for each of our customers that are getting a bike, we give them a custom plaque that
Okay.
has the serial number of their bike, the name of their bike, and the birthday of their bike.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Like you
Yeah,
personalized it to them.
yeah.
That's very cool. So I'm kind of curious to know, like obviously $5,000 for like a motorbike seems really really cheap to me, and it's awesome that you guys are building something that affordable and that it could basically majority of cities in North America you could at least ride them for many months of the year if not all year round. Um, I'm curious to know. Will you just stay with kind of doing motorbikes, or are you guys looking to kind of expand outside of that, or it doesn't really make sense to kind of expand outside of that?
We're a mobility company,
Okay,
and whether it's two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, or more, a lot of the same technology applies.
okay,
We're using renewable energy. We're using these batteries to power motors that propel vehicles.
interesting.
We're motorcycle riders, so
Sure,
naturally we gravitated towards building motorbikes. But we can do anything, but we just want to make sure that we're keeping laser focus on the task at hand. And in
sure,
this case, it's building these motorbikes.
sure. That makes a lot of sense. The only reason I ask is just because I live in Canada, so we have snow for parts of the year.
Yeah.
But no, that's awesome. The other thing I'm kind of curious about, is there different color variations? Are you going to offer that at some point?
Right now, we're offering any color you want, as long as it's black. And it worked for Henry Ford.
Sure. No, it makes
Um,
sense. But I
we've had a lot of people actually ask, hey, what colors are going to be available, and we are working on offering different color schemes. But right now, black kind of goes with everything, and
sure.
people seem to like it. And just like again using Tesla as a model, you can't get a yellow Tesla Model S. They offer a few colors,
Sure.
but if you want to paint your car or wrap it in vinyl, you can do that, but that's on your own dime.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense. And kind of why I asked you those two questions is because it kind of circles back to what you mentioned earlier on about like basically building your model based off Apple, right?
Hmm.
I if I order a MacBook Pro, well, I get the silver version, right?
Hmm.
And if I order the iPad, whatever, I get maybe a couple colors. And again, like you
Hmm.
said, the Tesla model. So I love the fact that you basically are like, this is what we're doing right now. We might offer a couple other colors, but we're really focusing on we're building, this one thing right now. We want to get it perfect. And then maybe in the future we'll consider adding other product lines, but right now we're just doing this thing. And I think that's super important to kind of just reiterate to people starting out because and that's kind of why I see the question if you're going to move to other kind of mediums or other vehicle types because so many people think that they need to get 10 different products, but it makes a lot of sense just to really focus on having one product be perfect exactly how you want it, and then maybe, and who knows, maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't do it. If it makes sense down the road, you'll consider it. I think I just wanted to kind of reiterate that again to the listener.
Yeah, I think that's a big pitfall that a lot of young companies fall into, that they get too distracted from the task at hand.
Sure.
And we in any startup can learn so much by getting a product out to market. At a certain point, it's good enough. Now, granted, it may not be perfect, but it's good enough. And you can learn so much more by launching your product and then iterating on it rather
Sure.
than polishing. And that's one thing that I've learned along the way. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want to see perfection, but at a certain point, it's good enough. And we can learn so much from our customer feedback that we can implement so much quicker than if we kept imagining and refining, and we can do that. We could spend 6 more months making our product what we think is perfect, and
Sure.
then we get that into the hands, and they say, oh, but if this were over here, then it would be easier to use. And we can learn that so much quicker by getting our product out in the market. And I think that applies to a lot of companies out there.
Sure, I think that's really good advice. So I'm curious, just kind of along that line, is there anything that you guys really learned once you released the product that you were like, oh, we probably should have done that, or oh, I never thought that this would be, or people would love this thing so much, like a certain thing about the bike?
That's a great question. The bits of feedback that is generally pretty consistent to us the bits of feedback that we're getting is actually pretty consistent with the things that we thought were either lacking or really quite strong. People really seem to resonate with the quick release batteries.
Sure.
And that was very important to us because we know that not everybody has a garage.
Totally.
And not everybody can just wheel their bike right in. Now, the reality is that you actually can wheel this into any apartment and into any elevator.
Really?
And you can wheel it into your office and park it next to the bicycles because there's no gas, there's no oil, there's no leak, there's no smell.
Right.
And so you can get to places that you really just cannot get to with a gas scooter or a small motorcycle. So a lot of the feedback that we're getting is actually quite consistent with our intention, and we're still even refining the experience, whether it's a security feature to deter thieves from taking your batteries. All these things are pretty consistent with what we had in mind. So the fact that we haven't had such harsh criticism suggests that maybe we could have launched quicker. But even in the early days, we got a lot of criticism. Our batteries are too boxy from our demo riders and people that we would share our product with. And to that end, we took that criticism and we refined the aesthetic and we smoothed off some edges, and that seemed to really go over well with our customers.
Sure. I think that's really cool, and it's almost like you're basically almost talking about somebody that's doing like a software startup, right? Where you just kind of keep refining things and you launch, and I love how I love the whole process to this, right? It's the whole thing is it's like a new era of manufacturing, basically, is what you guys are doing. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I think that's totally appropriate as it applies to software as well. In a software company, you're going to have bugs in your software.
Sure.
And some of the best feedback you can get is from the customers. And I think a lot of these customers, especially in our case, our early customers are people that they understand that they're getting serial number 001,
sure,
002, and we're getting our bike store customers, and they know that they're early adopters, and that they're going to get the support that probably our 100th customer might not quite get.
Sure, that makes sense.
And so they win because they get a great experience, and they also get to be the first person or the third person to have one of these cool bikes that we believe is really going to change urban transportation.
Sure, that's awesome. But Nathan, on that note, we're kind of running out of time, so maybe let's close the show again with where people can find you guys online and any other social media links you want to promote.
Absolutely. We're at boltmotorbikes.com, just like a lightning bolt. And we're very active on social, so our big outlets are Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and it's Bolt Motorbikes.
Awesome, man. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be on the show, and I look forward to following your guys' progress throughout the rest of the year and beyond. And again,
thanks a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, man. And hopefully next time I'm in San Francisco, I can come down and we can meet up.
It's a must.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Sounds good, Kevin. Well, it's an absolute pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to keeping in touch, man.
Sounds great, man. All right, we'll talk soon.
Yep, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show was done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.